Looking to improve your life, brush up on your personal growth techniques? You are in the right place. Welcome to Life's Little Lessons with your host, author of Designing Your Own Destiny, Kevin A. Dunlap.
Hello, and this is Kevin Dunlap with Life's Little Lessons. I am the proprietor of this show, and right now we are in season 2 of our broadcast. This season is actually geared mainly toward entrepreneurs, talking to other people that have been out there. Some of them are going to be brand new, and some of them are actually going to be seasoned professionals that have been doing this business for a few years. And today we actually have a gentleman that's been in business since 2009. His name is Jim Guzik. He is the president and an IT professional for his company that is called Spectrum Networks. Good morning, everybody. And Jim, welcome to our show.
No, thank you for having me, Kevin.
We've known each other for a few years now. We met in some classes that we were taking. I think back in like 2014 is when we actually first crossed paths. Is that correct?
It's been a couple of years. I was thinking about that myself, and I would say like 2013 or 2014 is my best guess.
So, Jim, tell me a little bit about yourself. You are the president of Spectrum Networks. Exactly what does Spectrum Networks do?
Well, we're a systems integration company. Our primary focus is servicing the IT needs and infrastructure support for small to medium-sized businesses. So essentially, our target market is primarily businesses that are not quite big enough to have their own full-time staff, or they don't have the budget to tackle a full-time IT director or CIO.
And could you tell us a little bit about what do you mean by IT? What is it that you do with these small or medium-sized businesses?
Well, it's pretty much soup to nuts. Every business runs on computers, and we are the go-to company to provide computer system support. And that includes everything from all the computers, the routers, firewalls, internet connections, servers, email systems, and all the mission critical line of business software that they run. And of course, the usual suspects, Word, Excel, Outlook as well. But primarily we handle the computer systems and all the associated components that go with it, all the way up to the internet and cloud services.
Okay. What kind of a business or what kind of ideal client is ideal for you or for services like that you offer?
Well, it depends on the business, but for the most part, once you get up to around in say 50 computers or so, you tend to have somebody that's on site full time, just because there's enough computers. Now, if it's structured properly, you can monitor and maintain those remotely. But generally speaking, there's just a lot of staff that has ongoing questions, and they just prefer to have somebody on site. And we do have some clients where we're on site 2 or 3 days a week. But once you get to a certain size, you almost need to have a presence on site, whether it's contract, outsourced, or a full-time employee.
Okay. And how long have you been in business?
Well, there's a backstory to that, but this particular, we have been in business since 2009, so about 8 years now.
Okay. And what's that backstory, just out of curiosity?
Well, I used to work for a robotics company, and in the early 90s, there was a recession, and I got laid off. And at the time, I was single, and I had no bills, no car payments. I was financially pretty solid. So I decided it was time for me to start my own business and be a computer consultant, even though I really had no business doing that. So I started my own computer consulting company back in, I want to say 91, 92 or thereabouts. And it was built on the back of a lot of experience that I learned from the robotics business, because the robotics world, it was an assembly line, and they all talk to each other. So all the robots were kind of networked using usually PC-based software. So I struck out on my own. I started my own company back in the early 90s, and I kept that company until about 2005 when I sold it.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about that. Because when people are starting a business, are you saying that they should look at it from the end in mind, as in actually selling it at some time in the future, so it's not completely just on them?
I think it's always good to have an exit plan, whether you intend to exercise it or not.
Okay.
And that really will shift a lot of the decision making that you have. If you don't have the goal in mind of making it a business that you could sell at some point in time, you wind up with an organization where it's difficult to sell it if the owner wears a lot of different hats. If you structure it such where you put a lot of systems in place, then it becomes a lot easier to sell. And typically when you sell a company, a lot of times some of the key employees will stay on for a period of time, whether it's a year or 3 years. But the ultimate goal is that you're going to transfer the systems that you have in place, not try to transfer the knowledge, because that would just take far too much time, and there's always a brain drain when you have staff change.
Okay. Now, have you ever read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki?
I have, indeed.
So it sounds like, for those of you that are out there listening to this show, there's a great book out there. It's one of the very first books that I read on financial literacy and things. It's called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And it's been around, I would say, probably since the late 90s. I know I picked it up in 2002. And in that book, they have the 4 quadrants. And on the left side, he has there's the E, which is the top left-hand corner, which stands for the employee or the employee mindset. And below that on the left-hand side is the S, which still stands for self-employed. In the upper right corner is the B, or the business owner. And a lot of people, and Jim just hit on this right there, a lot of people think when they're starting their own business that they're a business owner. In reality, they're actually a self-employed person. Where Jim was just saying that he had other people in place, so therefore he could sell the business, so therefore he's selling a B rather than trying to sell an S. Like as an example, if you're doing all the work yourself, as Jim was just saying, you're wearing all of these hats. Let's say you're a dentist, you really can't sell your dental practice because you're the dentist, you're the one doing all the labor. However, if you go with the end in mind, with how can I remove myself from this, like Jim did in his first company, I think that is one ideal key aspect for any entrepreneur when they're actually starting a business. Would you agree with that?
I agree wholeheartedly. If you are a self-employed, or the business is so dependent on the owner who may be a micromanager or a control freak, you don't have much to sell other than the assets. I mean, you can sell the equipment or anything that you've acquired, but anyone could buy that. You're really selling systems and clients and an established business with methodologies. Another great book is one called The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber.
Yes.
Great book. They make an analogy between the mom and pop versus a McDonald's. I mean, a McDonald's, you could take out the one owner, put a new owner in the next day, and everything runs exactly the same because they have systems in place instead of, we don't know how to do that. Jim used to do that, or Kevin used to do that. If you've got that type of a structure, then it doesn't command as much money when it comes time to sell it.
And I fully agree with that. E-Myth Revisited is a phenomenal book. And the E does not stand for electronic. It actually stands for entrepreneur. For any of you guys out there that are listening to this show, Rich Dad Poor Dad is a phenomenal book, as well as the E-Myth Revisited. Very good reads for anybody that's looking to start a business. And Jim, let me ask you this. Why is it that you started this current IT business? What was the reason behind you actually starting this?
Well, I've always been a bit of a, I don't want to say renegade, but I've always kind of been out on the fringes of not wanting to do things the way it's always been done. It's not it's almost like a personality trait for me. When I got the opportunity, I've always kind of, I think a lot of people have a dream of starting their own business or running their own business because, frankly, working for someone else is, it's frustrating. It's frustrating. A lot of times you may have some good suggestions or good ideas, and they don't take them to heart. So, you feel, I think it kind of stifles the human spirit to have that day-to-day grind. And when I initially started out on my own, I was living in Huntington Beach, and I was my own boss, and I could do whatever I wanted whenever I wanted to. Of course, it takes a while to build up to a point where you're so busy you can't take a day off, but that comes later.
And that is absolutely true. One of the things I realized, and a lot of people realize, is if you're going from the 40-hour week job and you're going to be starting your own business and you're going to be doing it full time, 40 hours a week is actually, if you're only working 40 hours a week, that's a miracle. You're normally putting in 50, 60, if not even 70 or 80 hours a week when you're first starting out. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And that was ultimately one of the reasons why I sold the business, because it had grown to such a point where it was affecting my personal life. The business was taking over my life. And, I got to a point where I just, my kids were growing up right before my eyes. And, I was a victim of my own success, for lack of a better term.
Mm-hmm. Because there are consequences, or there are things that you have to pay in order to have that kind of success. I mean, like you're saying, you weren't there for your kids for many of their years that they were growing up, because that was a sacrifice that you had to make, or that you did make. You didn't have to make it. You decided to make it.
I agree.
Now, could you tell me about some of your early successes when you were just starting out with Spectrum Networks?
Well, it's funny when I look back on when I first started out. The first time around, looking back, I was young, and it was a really, really bad idea. I mean, I had no real established clients. I had done some volunteer work for some places, and I had some expertise, and I was taking some classes to expand my technology skills. But I really had no business doing it. And in retrospect, it's a miracle it worked. But I was fortunate enough to meet some people that introduced me to some of their clients, some CPAs and some other ones. And I was able to build the business slowly over time. But at the time, it was purely ridiculous that it would be even a successful business, because I didn't have a business plan. I didn't have really any established clients. It was just a pure it was chasing a dream, I guess, at the point. And 15 years later, it was still working. So I must have done something right.
Well, and actually, I would have to agree with you that what you went through is probably going to be very common to a lot of people, especially if they're starting a business in an area that they're not necessarily the expert in. They say, if I'm starting a new coaching business, or I'm starting a new, whatever it is, you're going to have that time frame at the very beginning where you are you're new, you have no clients. But for you, you actually made some connections that actually got you your first few clients. Was that correct? Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, I was, it was a combination of being a little bit of luck, a little bit of preparation, and networking. I met a CPA. I subleased some office space from him, and he was able to introduce me to some of his clients that weren't happy with the people they were using. And I also started doing some other networking events. So I think it's a combination of everything. I don't think there's any secret sauce or one formula that works,
but you remained open to whatever was coming to you, or even suggestions from other people. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yes, and more importantly, I didn't listen to a lot of people. There's always going to be some people that are going to tell you, you can't do that, or that's not possible, or what are you, crazy, or how are you going to make a living, or things like that. I didn't really listen to that or focus on any of that. I was young enough and had enough of a belief in the dream that a lot of that just rolled off my back. So that was another blessing, that I didn't overanalyze all the ways or reasons why it wouldn't work. I just focused on increasing my skills and growing clients, getting referrals, and networking.
Okay. And because where we met in 2000, I believe it was 2014, was through some other kinds of personal growth type classes and business type classes. If you surround yourself with other entrepreneurs or other people of like mind, in my opinion, you're going to succeed a lot better, because the average 9-to-5 wage earner, they don't look at things as an entrepreneur. So they look at failures before they're going to look at successes. While an entrepreneur, if you're dealing with other people, they're going to be your supporters. They're going to be the ones that are going to be there to give you rub your shoulders if you need it, so you can take on that next client, or to get to that next paycheck, or to get that next fee or whatever. So would you say don't listen to the people that are not actually pursuing the same kind of a goal that you are? Is that kind of what you were saying as well?
Well, no matter what you do, there's always going to be people that are going to discourage you. They think they're helping you, but they're not. I can give you an example. When I grew up in Chicago, and I decided I wanted to move to California, and I decided this is what I'm doing. So I put a plan in place. I started saving money and reducing my expenses, doing everything I needed to do that. And it took me about a year to get to the point where I could actually do that. But during that year's time, when you tell people your dream, you would not believe the ridiculous things that they would say. And it's like, well, you've never even lived in California. What could you possibly know about it that's going to help me to get there?
Right, because just if it was your mom or your dad or your best friend doing that, they're doing it out of their own love and support and trying to help you. Unknowingly, they're actually hurting you, or they're dream stealers or something along those lines.
Yeah, I don't think that it's a lot of it just has to do with sometimes it's their own insecurities.
Okay.
Where they maybe they feel bad because they had some dreams when they're younger and they didn't do anything about it. And now they see someone that says, when you get to the point where you flat out say, this is what I'm doing this, I'm going to start my own business, I'm going to move to Australia or whatever the case may be, some people will initially be supportive, but as time goes on, then they start to feel a little bit of jealousy because you're actually doing what they wish they had the courage to do.
Yes, exactly. I remember seeing this one show, this one comedian, and this was a few years ago on an HBO special, and I'm talking like 10, 15 years ago. And even though he was making a joke, he was actually also being very serious. And basically the punchline was, when is it that you see other people's successes as your failures?
Yeah, that sums it up very well.
Yeah, it's huge. Even before I moved I'm currently living in Las Vegas. I moved here from North Carolina, and I had one of my roommates back then. He was a struggling actor, and his mother was trying to dissuade him from being an actor. And I basically put him aside one day, and please excuse my French. She may love you, but what does she know about the acting business? If she has no idea, if she knows nothing about it, then why even listen to any advice from her?
Yeah, exactly.
It's your mom, I get it. However, would you take advice from a fat person how to lose weight, or a marriage counselor that's been married 7 times? You have to look at the people what they're saying to you, as well as, you don't want them to dissuade you, especially if they've never done it themselves.
Yeah, and I think that it's not a case where you just I think that you can learn something from everybody. That every
Yes.
you meet knows more about something on some subject, no matter who that may be. Even if it's a homeless guy in the street, he knows where to get a free meal or whatever. It doesn't really matter. There's always something that can learn from someone. And there's another great quote that kind of drives me too. It goes something like, usually we think that brave people have no fear. And the truth is that they are very intimate with fear. It's just they deal with it in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone who's brave, it's not that they have no fear. It's just that they kind of square off with it and say, well, show me what you got.
Well, and I agree with you, because to me, it's all about controlling that fear. Because fear is very, very helpful. It's what keeps you sharp. If you're a skydiver and you say, I have no fear, well, one of these days, if you don't have, by constantly saying that, you may accidentally forget to put on your parachute when you jump out of the airplane. The fear is what keeps you a little bit sharp.
Absolutely.
And now to go down a little bit of a different path here, could you tell me about say, when you were first getting started, what were some of your biggest challenges? I know you were mentioning about not having any clients, but what were some of your biggest challenges, or maybe even an early failure that may have been a life lesson for you?
Well, when I first got started, I didn't have a lot of clients. So I was doing everything myself. I was a one-man shop. And as time went on and the business grew, much like some other things in life, I didn't realize that suddenly one day I woke up and I realized that I was spending almost all day preparing sales tax returns and doing other things, and I didn't realize how valuable, how precious my time was, and I didn't. Because this was the first time I'd ever owned a business, I didn't realize that your time is extremely valuable. It's much better to pay a bookkeeper or someone else to already knows how to do this, instead of going through the whole learning curve of learning how to do it yourself. And so once I started getting lawyers and accountants and bookkeepers and things like that, I would just hand stuff off and say, here you go. They would say, okay, your sales tax return is done, or you need to file some corporate tax returns, or whatever the case may be. And while I could certainly do that myself and learn how to do it myself, because the business wasn't that big, I didn't have a lot of complex accounting to deal with, but it was a insidious leech on my time when I could be doing other things like generating revenue instead of squandering my precious time.
And I'm going to fully agree with you there. And for those of you that are the listeners out there, when you are starting to get to the point where you're making some decent income in your business, then yes, you need to hire other people to do the stuff either you don't want to do, or, and I hate to say it this way, but it's kind of beneath what your value is. As an example, if you could hire a bookkeeper and pay them, say, $12 an hour to do your books for you for a couple of hours a week, and you're actually charging your client $50 an hour, well, when you're doing your bookkeeping yourself, you're now just getting paid $12 an hour.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
So it's not, you definitely have to start outsourcing early on even.
You're losing money in it, and it kind of, I think the best advice I could give you is that if you're small and you're just starting out, it happens slowly over time, and you don't notice it, and then suddenly you realize, I'm spending way too much time, redesigning my web page. I'm spending way too much time on fill in the blanks. But just have an awareness of it, and have an awareness of how valuable your time is. Your time is extremely precious.
Exactly. And that's, I think, is probably one of the hardest lessons for new entrepreneurs to realize is that outsourcing is how much is your time worth, and what can you have somebody else do? Even if you go into some place like Fiverr or Elance or whatever it's called now, Upworks, or having somebody else do that work for you, just do so it's off your platter, so you can actually concentrate on the bigger money making things, or actually even getting more or newer clients.
And it's much easier now than it was back then. I mean,
with the internet, oh my gosh! I was just at a talk recently, and it was, well, how would you be able to run your business like you're doing now if it was 20 years ago? Pre-internet.
Oh, well, almost all the work I did was on site. I had to drive from client to client. But now I do the bulk of everything. I've automated a lot of things. A lot of things are done remotely. I still make sure that I have FaceTime with my clients, but realistically, I could do everything remotely. Very, very seldom I ever have to visit the premises.
Okay. Well, now I'm going to go on the opposite side here. Could you tell me about some of your early setbacks or your early failures but you still overcame those in order to stay in business? Because not everything is going to be successes when you're starting a business. Would you agree? There's always going to be setbacks.
Well, those are important because just, much like the first time you touched a hot burner on the stove, there are some lessons that you will learn that will stick with you, and you will never make that mistake again.
Hopefully.
Well, yes. Well, I can't speak for everyone, but you get my point. Besides the importance of being aware of how valuable your time is, and sometimes it's difficult. It's a difficult call to make when the right time is to bring on another employee, or when is the right time to outsource some functions that you're currently doing. One of the biggest lessons I learned was about staying on top of estimated taxes, because you get penalized if you guess wrong. So you have to guess about your revenues for a quarterly basis, and then if you guess wrong, then you get penalized for guessing wrong. So it's important to manage that, because once you get behind on any taxes, the penalties are severe and stiff.
Okay, and I'm glad you pointed that out, because that's not even something I had even thought about, even sharing on this show, or at least on this particular broadcast, was since you're getting paid by your employer, which being self-employed, you're not taking your state or your federal taxes out. When every time you get a paycheck, you've got to put some away into a tax account that is just specifically for your quarterly or your annual taxes. And that's something everybody has to do. It doesn't matter what kind of a self-employed person that you are. Even if you're a realtor or insurance agent, you still have to do the same thing.
Absolutely. And it's real easy to just, you get whatever that number is, you get $5,000 in the door, and, you just think that that's all your $5,000, but once you pay all the expenses and all those things, another shocking epiphany that my accountant pointed out to me is when you're employed by someone else, you pay essentially half of the Social Security tax. And I'm not a tax expert, so let's put that disclaimer in there right now. But when you're self-employed, you have to pay both halves of a Social Security tax, and it winds up increasing your tax liability 10 to 15%. Whereas before, maybe you were in a 30% tax bracket, now you could be in a 40 or even a 45% tax bracket, because you have to pay both halves of the Social Security tax, which you didn't before.
Right. Well, that's why, that's not the purpose of the shows that talk about corporations or things like that, but you definitely want to, in the near future, to look at different entities so that you can incorporate, and that will help you with your tax liability by having deductions and other kinds of things as well. But however, that's not really the purpose of this this show today. We'll interview a CPA at another time. Now, let me ask you this then. Knowing where you are today, and if you had a time machine to go back in time, would there be anything that you would change, or would you keep things all the same way? Because a lot of times our biggest lessons are from the mistakes that we make. So,
absolutely. By and large, I think I would keep everything just the way it was. The only exception that I would say is there are a couple of instances where I should have made a change sooner. In other words, I should have hired my first employee sooner. It's just once you get them trained to get them up to speed, or once I got the bookkeeper online, it was such a relief, and it was so nice to have some of that off my plate so I could focus on growing the business and focus on things that I was good at. That some of the changes I would have just done it sooner. Not that I wouldn't have done it, or not that it was a mistake. It's just that I didn't do it as soon as I should have.
Okay, and that's good to realize. Something like that is, if you're on the fence on hiring somebody, then it's probably you should go ahead and hire them. Is basically what you're saying.
Yeah, an employee is a tough one. Once you get your first employee, that's a commitment, because now you've got to make payroll every week, and now you've got to pay payroll taxes, and there's it's a big step if you've never done it before. But the other side of the coin is it gives you a lot of ability to say, I need you to do this for me. I need you to take care of this because I've got to take care of something else. Whereas before, it's like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to stay up till 3 a.m, or I'm going to stay up. And sometimes if you're a one-man shop, there's no one to hand off anything to.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then let me ask you, because we're running out of time here. So, what are some of the biggest lessons that you think you have learned that you were completely unaware of when you first got started in business?
Oh gosh, kind of caught me off guard with that one. Biggest lessons. I think the biggest lesson is have systems in place. Have systems in place. That way, if you have an employee leave, or you need to add additional employees, this is how we do it. It's not a case where the knowledge transfer goes from one employee to another. You've got a list of procedures, a set of methodologies. This is how it's done. And if everyone follows that, then it makes it much easier to scale. So if you can put systems in place, and when you do put the systems in place, keep in mind that you want these to be able to scale up so that they can grow with the company.
Okay. And that's a very good thing that you point that out, because if you don't have that system in place, essentially you're just reinventing the wheel every time that situation occurs, regardless if you got a new employee or if you're taking on a new client. You have that system in place that this is what I do with A, B, C, D, E. And you, regardless of if that client is a one-person client or one computer client in your case, or 100 computer client, you still have that same system in place. You just, as you said, you just scaled differently.
Absolutely. And I've even seen this. A lot of my clients are small businesses, and I'll visit them and they'll do something, and I'll say to them, why do you do that? Well, the person before me used to do it that way. I'm like, okay, so let me get this straight. I'll give you a classic example. I don't want to take up too much time. I have a client where they schedule their staff, and they have this big spreadsheet they use, and all the person's name and the days and the hours that they're going to work. Now, this is an electronic document, And the way this person distributes it to all the staff is by taking a picture of her monitor with her phone and texting it to everybody.
Oh, well, she's being inventive. She's being creative, but
never occurred to her to email it to them.
Oh, wow.
The person before her taught her, that's how we do it. This is how we do it.
Wow. Okay. And then let me ask you another one then. If someone in the audience is just starting or is just getting started, what would you tell them? If they're wet behind the ears, newbie, just getting started, today's their day, today's day one of them making that decision, what would you tell that person?
Well, I think that some people will do it part-time and get it to a point where they can actually, quit their business. I can tell you, for me, when I got laid off and I decided, you know what, I'm not going to look for another job. I'm going to start my own business. Well, at that point, it has to work. It has to work. So, there's some benefit to actually going all in, because, you've raised the stakes significantly. If you do it part-time, you'll probably be partly successful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I see that all the time, especially with people doing network marketing or some kind of multi-level marketing, is they still keep their full-time job, but then they dabble in the MLM. However, their level of success is always going to be dependent upon how much time are they able to put into that business, regardless of what that business is.
Yeah, and I think it varies by personality type. I mean, there's some people that it works for, but that's just it's been my experience that, once I went full-time with it, then it was kind of this has to work. It's not, failure's not an option here. I have to make this work.
And I've seen that before where I needed that one more sale in order to pay rent, just to basically break even, and just putting that kind of energy. Now I'm going to get a little woo-woo here, but putting that kind of energy out into the universe, so all of the time you will attract that one extra sale, that one extra client.
Exactly.
Because you're being open to it.
Yeah, and if you still have a full-time job and you're doing this part-time, you don't have that hunger or that this has to happen. I have to make this happen, or how can I make this happen? I need this to happen.
Okay. Oh, very well said. And so let me ask you this: what do you have coming up in the near future with your company, with Spectrum Networks?
Well, we're exploring a thing called blockchain, which is the underlying technology on Bitcoin. I want to make the distinction here that Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency that uses blockchain, but I can tell you blockchain is going to revolutionize the way a lot of businesses operate, much the same way that the internet and email changed things back in the 90s. It hasn't really gone mainstream yet, but the thing called blockchain is going to really change a lot of industries. It's going to transform industries, and we're focusing on it. We're doing some classes and some looking for some businesses that are finding new ways to leverage this emerging technology. And there is a way that we can conduct business electronically in such a way that it's impossibe for it to be a fraudulent transaction.
Well, Jim, I do want to say thank you for being on the show today. We've learned a lot. And how would you like for people to be able to get a hold of you if they wanted to use your services for IT services?
Well, our company name is Spectrum Networks.
Okay.
Our website is www.spectrum-network.com, spectrum-network.com.
No S?
Nope, singular.
Okay.
Spectrum-network.com. And they can also call us at 949-322-9894.
Okay.
And there's a contact us portion on the website. You can send us an email directly from there.
And I will also be putting the website as well as the telephone number in the description section below the podcast here. So you can go also click on that link that's going to be in the description for this podcast. And so, Jim, I do want to say thank you for being on the show today. This has been a pleasure. It's good reconnecting with you. We've only talked to each other a few times over the last few years. However, it's been really great reconnecting with you.
Thanks. Appreciate your time today.
My pleasure. Well, everybody, thank you for listening to the show. If you want to leave a comment, please just do so below this below the description section. And we look forward to hearing you or seeing you guys on the next show. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Life's Little Lessons with your host, author of Designing Your Own Destiny, Kevin A. Dunlap. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit plentifulperspectives.com, facebook.com/KevinADunlap.author, and on Twitter @Kevin A. Dunlap. We'll catch you on the next episode of Life's Little Lessons.